I am Sarah, and at 26 years old, I thought I understood betrayal. I thought the worst pain came from strangers who hurt you, enemies who deceive you, or bosses who fire you without cause. But I was wrong. The deepest cuts come from the people you trust most, the ones who know exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. 3 months ago, my entire world crumbled when I discovered that Marcus, the man I had been planning to marry, had been secretly seeing my best friend Emma behind my back. But this story is not about heartbreak. This is about what happens when someone underestimates the woman they betrayed. If you have ever been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted completely, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you believe that some betrayals deserve consequences. And subscribe to hear how this tale of deception and revenge unfolds in ways none of them saw coming. Before I tell you how I discovered their affair and what I did about it, let me paint you a picture of how perfect my life seemed just 4 months ago. Marcus and I had been together for 3 years. We met at a marketing conference where he was presenting on digital strategy, and I was there representing my graphic design firm. He was confident, charming, and had this infectious laugh that made everyone in the room gravitate toward him. Our first date lasted 14 hours. We talked until sunrise about everything from childhood dreams to business ambitions, and I knew that night he was different. Emma had been my closest friend since college. We were roommates for 2 years, maid of honor at each other's sisters' weddings, and the type of friends who could communicate entire conversations with just a look across a crowded room. She was the first person I called when Marcus proposed last Christmas. She screamed so loudly on the phone that her neighbors probably thought someone was being murdered. She helped me pick out wedding venues, taste test cakes, and even offered to help pay for my dress when I fell in love with one slightly outside my budget. Marcus owned a successful digital marketing agency with 12 employees and clients across 3 states. Emma worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative, traveling constantly but always making time for our friendship. On the surface, we were 3 successful young professionals living our best lives in downtown Seattle. Marcus and I had just put an offer on a beautiful craftsman house in Queen Anne. Emma had finally gotten the promotion she had been working toward for 2 years. We celebrated everything together, shared every milestone, and I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Tuesday evening in March. I had finished a particularly challenging project for a nonprofit client and decided to surprise Marcus at his office with his favorite Thai food. His assistant had already left for the day, so I used my key to let myself into the building. The lights were off in the main workspace, but I could see the glow from his corner office. I walked quietly down the hallway, planning to surprise him, when I heard voices coming from his office. One voice was definitely Marcus, but the other made my blood run cold. It was Emma. I stood frozen in the hallway, trying to process what I was hearing. They were not discussing business or planning a surprise party for me. The conversation was intimate, personal, filled with the kind of whispered words that lovers share when they think no one can hear them. I heard Marcus say her name in a way he used to say mine, with tenderness and longing that made my stomach drop to the floor. My hands started shaking so violently that I nearly dropped the bag of food. Part of me wanted to burst through that door immediately and confront them both. Part of me wanted to run away and pretend I had never heard anything. Instead, I did something that would prove crucial later. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For 23 minutes, I stood in that dark hallway listening to my fiancé and my best friend plan their secret weekend getaway to Vancouver. I heard Emma giggle as Marcus described the hotel room he had booked overlooking the harbor. I heard him tell her how much he loved her laugh, the same compliment he had given me on our first date. I heard her worry about lying to me again, and I heard him assure her that I would never find out because I trusted them both completely. The most devastating part was not just learning about their affair. It was discovering how long it had been going on. From their conversation, I pieced together that they had been seeing each other for over 8 months. 8 months of secret meetings, stolen kisses, and elaborate lies. 8 months of Emma helping me plan a wedding to a man who was cheating on me with her. 8 months of Marcus holding me at night while thinking about another woman. When they finally stopped talking and I heard movement in the office, I quickly retreated to the stairwell and waited. Emma emerged first, checking her phone and smoothing her hair before heading toward the elevator. Marcus appeared a few minutes later, locking his office and whistling softly to himself. I watched from the shadows as the man I had planned to spend my life with walked away, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire world was about to change. I drove home in complete silence, my mind reeling with everything I had just learned. The Thai food sat untouched in the passenger seat, growing cold as I tried to process the magnitude of their betrayal. By the time I reached our apartment, I had made a decision. I was not going to confront them immediately. I was not going to break down crying or throw his belongings out the window or call Emma screaming accusations. Instead, I was going to be smart about this. That night, when Marcus came home acting completely normal, kissing me hello and asking about my day, I played along perfectly. I told him about my client meeting, asked about his day at the office, and even suggested we start looking at honeymoon destinations. He smiled and pulled me close, telling me how much he loved me and how lucky he felt to have found someone so understanding and trusting. The irony was not lost on me. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a master of deception myself. I maintained my normal routines, continued wedding planning conversations, and even had lunch with Emma twice, listening to her talk about work stress, while knowing exactly what was really causing her distraction. But behind the scenes, I was gathering evidence and formulating a plan that would ensure both of them understood the true cost of their betrayal. I hired a private investigator named David Chen, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity cases. Within 3 days, he had photographed them entering and leaving hotels, documented their text message patterns, and even captured video of them at a romantic dinner across town. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but proof of their affair was just the beginning. What I discovered next about Marcus's business practices and Emma's professional conduct would give me leverage I never expected to have. Sometimes the universe provides exactly what you need for justice. And in this case, it provided me with information that would destroy both of their careers if used correctly. As I sat in my car outside that restaurant, watching through David's telephoto lens as my fiancé fed chocolate cake to my best friend, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. The heartbroken woman who had stood crying in that office hallway 2 weeks earlier was gone. In her place was someone calculating, patient, and absolutely determined to ensure that their betrayal would cost them everything they valued most. The revenge I was planning would not be quick or simple. It would be methodical, devastating, and perfectly legal. By the time I was finished with them, they would understand that some people should never be underestimated, and some betrayals carry consequences that last a lifetime. What David uncovered about Marcus's business went far beyond simple adultery. Through his connections and investigative skills, he discovered that Marcus had been inflating client billing hours, claiming work that was never performed, and pocketing the difference. One client in particular, a local restaurant chain, had paid nearly $40,000 for a comprehensive social media campaign that Marcus had outsourced to a freelancer for $8,000 while keeping the rest for himself. But Emma's situation was even more interesting. Her frequent travel schedule that I had always assumed was for legitimate pharmaceutical sales calls was actually covering up a much more lucrative side business. She had been selling prescription medication samples to unlicensed dealers, using her access as a sales representative to steal inventory that was meant for doctors' offices. The profit margins were enormous, and she had been running this operation for over a year. David presented me with detailed financial records, photographs, and even audio recordings of phone conversations that painted a picture of two people who were not just cheating on me emotionally, but were also criminals in their professional lives. The universe had handed me exactly what I needed to ensure their betrayal would cost them everything. My plan began to take shape over sleepless nights spent poring over the evidence. I would not just expose their affair and walk away. I would systematically dismantle every aspect of the lives they had built on lies and illegal activities. They had underestimated me, assuming I was too trusting, too naive, too in love to ever see through their deception. That assumption would be their downfall. The first phase involved documenting everything while maintaining my facade of blissful ignorance. I continued planning our wedding, even scheduling a tasting at our venue for the following month. I made sure Marcus knew about every appointment, every decision, every deposit. I wanted him to feel the weight of his deception growing heavier with each lie he told me about loving me forever. Emma and I maintained our regular coffee dates every Wednesday morning at our favorite cafe downtown. I would sit across from her, watching as she checked her phone constantly, probably texting Marcus while pretending to listen to me discuss centerpiece options and bridesmaid dress colors. Her guilt was becoming more obvious by the day, but she was too deep in the affair to back out now. During one of these coffee meetings, Emma made a mistake that would prove crucial to my plan. She mentioned feeling stressed about an upcoming audit at her company, something about inventory discrepancies that had her managers asking questions. She tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just routine paperwork, but I could see the genuine fear in her eyes. That evening, I called David and asked him to focus specifically on Emma's work situation. Within 48 hours, he confirmed my suspicions. The pharmaceutical company had indeed noticed missing inventory, and Emma was one of 3 sales representatives under investigation. They had not yet discovered the extent of her theft, but they were getting close. This information became the cornerstone of my strategy. Instead of simply exposing them and moving on, I would use their own criminal activities to ensure the consequences lasted far beyond a broken engagement and ended friendship. I would make sure their betrayal cost them their careers, their reputations, and their freedom. Marcus had no idea that I had been quietly documenting his fraudulent billing practices. Every inflated invoice, every fake timesheet, every client he had overcharged was now in my possession with detailed proof of his deception. The restaurant chain alone had grounds for a lawsuit that would bankrupt his agency and potentially land him in prison for fraud. As I sat in our apartment night after night, listening to Marcus talk about our future while knowing he was planning secret rendezvous with Emma, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. They had created this situation through their choices, their lies, their complete disregard for my feelings and trust. Now, they would live with the consequences of underestimating the woman they had betrayed. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I would not have to fabricate evidence or manipulate situations. I would simply ensure that the right people learned about activities that Marcus and Emma were already engaged in. Their own actions would destroy them. I was just going to make sure the dominoes fell at exactly the right time and in exactly the right order. 2 weeks before our scheduled wedding venue tasting, I made the first move. I anonymously submitted Marcus's fraudulent billing records to the restaurant chain's corporate headquarters, along with detailed financial analysis showing exactly how much they had been overcharged. I included David's photographs of Marcus at expensive restaurants and hotels during times when he claimed to be working on their account from his office. The response was swift and devastating. Within 72 hours, Marcus received a cease and desist letter demanding immediate repayment of fraudulent charges, along with notification that criminal fraud charges were being filed with the district attorney's office. His largest client had not only terminated their contract, but was pursuing legal action that would likely force him into bankruptcy. Marcus came home that evening looking like he had aged 10 years in a single day. His hands shook as he poured himself a drink and tried to explain to me that there had been some misunderstanding with the client, some paperwork issues, that his lawyer would sort out quickly. I played the supportive fiancé perfectly, rubbing his shoulders and assuring him that everything would work out fine. That same week, I made an anonymous call to Emma's corporate compliance department. I provided them with specific dates and locations where she had been selling stolen medication samples, along with the names of her buyers that David had identified through surveillance. I even included photographs of her conducting transactions that looked nothing like legitimate pharmaceutical sales calls. The investigation moved quickly once they had specific information to follow. Emma's company had been looking for the source of their inventory problems for months, and suddenly they had a clear suspect with undeniable evidence. By Friday afternoon, Emma had been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation that would likely result in federal charges for drug trafficking. When Emma called me crying that evening, claiming she had been falsely accused of stealing from her company, I listened with perfect sympathy while taking notes on everything she said. Her panic was genuine and well-founded. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and she had no idea that her secret weekend trips with Marcus had been documented in detail by a professional investigator. Both of them were now facing the collapse of their professional lives. But they still had no idea that I knew about their affair. They were dealing with these crises separately, unable to comfort each other openly, forced to maintain the pretense that they were just friends while their worlds crumbled around them. But I was not finished with them yet. The personal betrayal still needed to be addressed, and I wanted them both to understand exactly who was responsible for their downfall before this was over. The wedding venue tasting was scheduled for the following Tuesday, and I had planned something special for that occasion that would tie everything together beautifully. The Tuesday morning of our venue tasting arrived with unusual clarity. I woke up before my alarm, feeling more focused and determined than I had in months. Marcus was still sleeping beside me, completely unaware that this would be the last morning we would ever wake up together. His phone had been buzzing constantly over the past few days with calls from lawyers, creditors, and former clients. The stress was showing on his face even in sleep, deep lines etched around his eyes that had not been there a month ago. I made coffee and checked my own phone, finding 3 missed calls from Emma. Her messages were increasingly frantic, begging me to call her back about something urgent she needed to discuss. I knew exactly what she wanted to talk about. Her company's investigation had accelerated, and she was desperate for someone to confide in about her mounting legal troubles. What she did not realize was that I had been orchestrating every development in her case from the beginning. David had sent me an update the night before confirming that both Marcus and Emma were now under active investigation by law enforcement. The district attorney's office had opened a formal case against Marcus for fraud, while the DA had taken over Emma's case due to the interstate nature of her drug trafficking operation. Neither of them understood the full scope of what they were facing, but they were about to learn. At 10:30, I met Marcus at the venue, a beautiful, historic mansion overlooking Puget Sound that we had fallen in love with during our first visit 8 months earlier. He arrived looking haggard and distracted, barely managing a smile when he kissed me hello. The wedding coordinator, a cheerful woman named Patricia, who had been working with us since the beginning, immediately noticed his demeanor. "Is everything all right?" she asked with genuine concern. "You both seem a little tense today." "Just some work stress," I replied smoothly. "Nothing that cannot be sorted out. We are still very excited about finalizing our plans." Marcus nodded absently, checking his phone for what must have been the 20th time since arriving. I knew he was expecting calls from his lawyer about the criminal charges, but I also suspected he was hoping to hear from Emma. What he did not know was that Emma was currently sitting in a federal building downtown, being interviewed by DEA agents about her drug trafficking activities. Patricia led us through the mansion, showing us the bridal suite where I would supposedly get ready, the garden where our ceremony would take place, and the ballroom where our reception would be held. Marcus went through the motions, nodding at appropriate moments and making half-hearted comments about the decorations. But his mind was clearly elsewhere. Now, I do need to discuss some logistics with you both, Patricia said, as we settled into chairs in her office. We have had a few changes to our vendor relationships that might affect your catering options, and I wanted to make sure we address them before your final payment is due next week. The mention of money made Marcus visibly uncomfortable. I knew his business accounts had been frozen as part of the fraud investigation, and he was struggling to cover even basic expenses. The irony of him worrying about wedding payments while facing potential prison time was not lost on me. Actually, Patricia, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out a thick envelope, I have something I need to share with both of you before we continue planning. Marcus looked at me with confusion, probably wondering if I had somehow learned about his financial troubles and was about to offer help. Patricia smiled expectantly, assuming I was presenting some kind of surprise or special request for our wedding day. Instead, I placed printed photographs on the table between us. The first image showed Marcus and Emma entering a downtown hotel together 3 weeks earlier. The second captured them sharing an intimate dinner at a restaurant I had never been to. The third was a close-up shot of them kissing passionately in the parking lot outside Emma's apartment building. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the photographs with his mouth slightly open, his face cycling through expressions of shock, panic, and desperate calculation. Patricia looked between us uncertainly, clearly realizing this was not a normal wedding planning meeting, but unsure how to respond to the sudden tension in the room. I think there has been a misunderstanding, Marcus finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. These pictures, they are not what they look like. Emma was upset about work issues, and I was just being a supportive friend. I smiled at him with the same expression I had been practicing in the mirror for weeks, calm and controlled despite the rage burning in my chest. Marcus, I have been recording your conversations for over a month. I know about Vancouver, about the hotel room overlooking the harbor, about how much you love Emma's laugh. I know about everything. His face went completely white. Patricia stood up abruptly, muttering something about giving us privacy, and quickly left the room. I could hear her heels clicking rapidly down the marble hallway as she fled from what was clearly about to become an extremely uncomfortable confrontation. Sarah, please, let me explain, Marcus began, but I held up my hand to stop him. There is nothing to explain, I said, pulling out more documents from my envelope. I know about your fraudulent billing practices. I know about the restaurant chain you have been stealing from. I know about Emma's drug trafficking operation. I know everything, Marcus, because I am the one who reported both of you to the authorities. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He actually staggered backward in his chair, gripping the armrests as he processed what I had just told him. For several long moments, he just stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, trying to reconcile the woman he thought he knew with the person who had systematically destroyed his life. You, he whispered. You did this. The investigation, the charges, everything. It was you. It was you, I corrected him. You made the choice to cheat. You made the choice to steal from your clients. You made the choice to lie to me every single day for 8 months while planning a future you never intended to honor. I simply made sure the right people learned about activities you were already engaged in. Marcus's shock was rapidly transforming into anger. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and began pacing the small office like a caged animal. You vindictive bitch, he snarled. Do you have any idea what you have done? I am facing prison time because of you. My business is ruined. My reputation is destroyed. Your business was built on fraud, I replied calmly. Your reputation was based on lies. I simply revealed the truth about who you really are. The same truth you revealed about yourself when you decided to betray the woman who loved you with her best friend. He stopped pacing and turned to face me directly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a moment, I wondered if he might actually try to hurt me physically. But then I remembered that David was waiting in the parking lot with cameras and recording equipment, documenting everything for the inevitable legal proceedings that would follow. "Where is Emma?" he demanded. "Does she know what you have done?" "Emma is currently explaining to federal agents why she thought selling stolen prescription medications was a good idea," I answered. "She has been in custody since 8 this morning. I assume she will be formally charged sometime this afternoon." The news about Emma's arrest seemed to drain all the fight out of him. He sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands as the full scope of his situation finally became clear. Both his professional and personal lives were over. The woman he had been cheating with was facing federal charges. The woman he had betrayed had orchestrated his complete destruction with surgical precision. "Why?" he asked, his voice muffled by his hands. "Why go this far? You could have just broken up with me. You could have walked away." I leaned forward in my chair, making sure he could see my face clearly when I answered. "Because you did not just cheat on me, Marcus. You made me complicit in your deception. You let me plan a wedding to a man who did not exist. You let me fall deeper in love with you while you were falling in love with someone else. You stole 8 months of my life that I will never get back." He looked up at me then, and I saw something I had never seen in his eyes before. Genuine fear. Not just of the legal consequences he was facing, but of me. Of what I was capable of when pushed too far. "You let Emma help plan our wedding while she was sleeping with my fiancé," I continued. "You both sat at my dinner table, ate food I cooked, accepted my trust and friendship while plotting behind my back. You made me the fool in my own life story. So no, I could not just walk away. Some betrayals require consequences." Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the sound where we had planned to exchange vows in just 2 months. When he finally spoke again, his voice was hollow and defeated. "What happens now?" I stood up and gathered my photographs, placing them carefully back in the envelope. "Now you face the consequences of your choices. Your trial starts in 3 months. Emma's will probably begin around the same time. I will be there for both, of course, as a witness for the prosecution." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back to him one final time. "Oh, and Marcus, Patricia will be sending you a bill for the canceled wedding. All deposits are non-refundable, as I am sure you remember from the contract you signed. Consider it a small additional fee for lying to the wrong woman." As I left the venue and walked toward my car, I felt something I had not experienced in months. Complete peace. The man who had betrayed me was sitting alone in that office, finally understanding the true cost of his deception. The best friend who had stabbed me in the back was in federal custody, facing years in prison for her crimes. But my revenge was not quite complete yet. There was still one final act to perform, one last message to send that would ensure neither of them ever forgot the lesson I had taught them about the dangers of underestimating the people who love you most. That evening, I drove to Emma's apartment building, knowing she would not be returning anytime soon. The DEA had made it clear during their press conference that she was being held without bail pending her formal arraignment. Her parents had already arrived from Portland, looking shell-shocked as they tried to understand how their successful daughter had become a federal drug trafficking suspect. I used the spare key Emma had given me years ago when we were still genuine friends. Her apartment felt different now, like a crime scene frozen in time. Coffee cups sat unwashed in the sink from the morning she was arrested. Her laptop remained open on the dining table, probably still logged into the encrypted messaging apps she had used to coordinate her illegal sales. But I was not there to reminisce or gather evidence. David had already provided law enforcement with everything they needed. I was there for something far more personal and symbolic. In Emma's bedroom closet, hanging in a place of honor, was the bridesmaid dress we had selected together just 6 weeks earlier. It was a beautiful sage green silk that complemented her complexion perfectly. She had been so excited about wearing it, talking endlessly about how honored she felt to stand beside me on the most important day of my life. I took the dress down from its hanger and laid it carefully on her bed. Then I pulled out a handwritten letter I had crafted specifically for this moment. The words had taken me days to perfect, and every sentence was designed to ensure she understood exactly who had orchestrated her downfall and why. Dear Emma, the letter began, by the time you read this, you will have learned that your best friend was not as naive and trusting as you believed. The federal charges you are facing, the evidence that led to your arrest, the systematic destruction of your career, all of it traces back to the woman whose wedding you were helping plan while sleeping with her fiancé. I placed the letter on top of the bridesmaid dress, then pulled out my phone to take one final photograph. The image captured everything perfectly. The dress she would never wear. The letter that would shatter any remaining illusions she had about my innocence. And the barren apartment that represented the life she had lost through her own choices. As I locked her apartment door for the last time, I felt the final piece of my plan clicking into place. Both Marcus and Emma would soon understand that their betrayal had not just cost them their freedom and careers. It had revealed them to themselves and everyone around them as fundamentally dishonest people who could not be trusted with anything valuable, including love and friendship. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation at the wedding venue, and both Marcus and Emma are now serving their sentences in federal prison. Marcus received 4 years for fraud and tax evasion. Emma got 6 years for drug trafficking. Their appeals were denied, their reputations destroyed, their futures forever marked by their criminal records. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what I did, if I think my revenge went too far. The answer is simple. I sleep better now than I have in years. They made their choices, and I simply ensured those choices had appropriate consequences. If this story taught you anything about the power of underestimating the wrong person, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, trust is the most valuable thing you can give, so choose wisely who deserves it. Thank you for watching. And never forget that some betrayals write their own endings.